Welcome to the Successful Encore Career Podcast, being brought to you by Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging, Nationwide Insurance, and InnoSource. I'm Brett Johnson, longtime volunteer with Employment for Seniors, and with me, as always, is Carol Ventresca.
Hi, Brett. How are you today?
I'm okay.
Wonderful. We have another great program.
Yes,
These are just, and I think we are approaching number 50.
We might be.
This could be.
We're dancing one side or the other of it.
Exactly. Yeah. This could be our, golden anniversary here. So, Brett, today we are going to have a great conversation with Kelly Fuller, who is the Director of Workforce Development with the Columbus Chamber of Commerce. Kelly had visited Employment for Seniors a couple of weeks ago. And of course, I said, we need her to come in and do a podcast. Bottom line, she's helping many in our community, but particularly vulnerable populations, those who are in need of extra assistance in finding employment. So, Kelly, welcome, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you both for having me here, especially if it's the golden anniversary. I'm very excited.
We'll have to make this number 50 now.
Yeah, one way or the other.
It's official.
One way or the other. Yes, it is our official 50.
Gonna happen.
So, Kelly, let's get to work here. We, when we were talking, I loved our conversation because we really both came from an academic background.
Yes.
So we're really looking at workforce development, not just as building employers in the community, but really making it work for our folks. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background in workforce development and your unique perspective that may be different than what the Chamber has had before?
Sure. So my background right out of college in the private sector was working with Dean Witter and Discover Card. So I found myself using, again, we're going to talk, I know, later about transformational skills, or transferable skills. But when I went to college to be a teacher, an elementary school teacher, but found out being alone with 38-year-olds was terrifying, and I didn't want to ever do that again.
My thoughts exactly.
Right.
Yes.
So those transferable skills of creating learning objectives and training and developing people, I was able then to leverage to become a part of a training and development organization with the financial services company. So I spent several years doing that, and then ended up in the public education space with the Career and Technical School in Central Ohio, Eastland Fairfield Career and Technical Schools. So working in a career and technical school environment, you have an opportunity to look at high school juniors and seniors and help them, groom them, give them the training and expertise they need to go out into the field. But we also worked with adult learners as well. So people that were getting their GEDs, people coming for English for speakers of other languages, people coming for those programs like HVAC, medical assisting, dental assisting, welding. So I think coming from that background, I was able to kind of see workforce development then from the eyes of the learner, from the person who's coming, through the program, right, and helping them kind of figure out, how do I navigate that system into employment? And what's really interesting over the last 6 years here in the state of Ohio is those conversations are happening at an even younger level. So we're not just talking to sophomores about making that decision to come to career centers as a junior or senior. We're talking to kids in middle school. We're talking to kids at elementary level about career exploration. So I think my background in getting me to this place of workforce development with the Chamber has really been kind of unique and nice, in that looking at it from the private sector perspective, from the business, what the business needs to staff appropriately, and then from the educator/student perspective, how do I prepare others or prepare myself to join the world of work?
I think one of the, I don't want to say mistakes, but maybe not quite correct path that we took as academicians, it was an either or.
Yes.
You were going to college or you weren't, and you had voc ed. When in actuality, that training out of vocational education could prepare a student to work immediately out of school, or to go to college and have a much clearer understanding of what they wanted to do.
Exactly. And I think those either or conversations and the push to have everyone go to a 4-year institution for education has contributed somewhat to our environment right now, where we have a real gap in the skilled trades.
Right.
So we have plumbers and, technicians, electricians, welders, mechanics, that those positions are soon going to be open, because individuals that are older that are now leaving the workforce, there's really no pipeline behind them.
Right. And I think, too, that students have not taken advantage of all the information because they've had the pressure of, I'm going to college.
Yes.
My mom and dad tells me I have to go to college, which is really a shame.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. We want to change the conversation so it's not a plan B, like that something like a vocational education or going into a trades or going into something that's not necessarily a 2-year or 4-year path could be someone's plan A, should be someone's plan A.
Right.
These are excellent jobs with great salaries, and not every job requires that 2 or 4 year degree.
Right. I think my years in continuing education taught me a lot of those issues, working with older adults who couldn't go to school when they were 18 and trying to go back now at 30 with families. And could we have done a better job of helping prepare them get going? So,
definitely.
Great.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of positions that you can look at. You can say you'll never be out of a job if you do this.
Absolutely.
I've heard that talked about logistics. If you're in logistics, you will never be out of work.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's true. Though the face of it may change somewhat.
Right.
But, but that's a perfect example. And I think about a personal experience last winter, I think when it was probably the coldest day of the year, because this is how it always happens. That's when your furnace goes out, right?
Sure.
So because no one in my home knows how to do anything about that except pick up a telephone, it's important to have someone that's local that has that expertise that can come out and take care of that problem. So I think those are the kinds, to your point, absolutely. I think those are the kinds of jobs that there'll always be a demand for, a local demand for that.
Correct. Right. Well, the economy is looking great. The outlook is great for Columbus, but there still could be some improvement, especially what we look at with the mature job seeker. Have you had an opportunity to look at this population of workers, and can you give us a more in-depth outlook perspective?
Sure. I think with a more mature worker, and I count myself in that group, the transferable skills that we have from past employment, from past life experiences, not meaning a past life, but from the work we have done in the past, I think allows a more mature worker, allows us to be able to contribute at a level that isn't often seen with someone who doesn't have that experience. So understanding and looking at that as an asset, really appreciating that about someone who's been in the workplace for a while, their ability to contribute. And I think also there's opportunity to educate employers. A lot of times when you're looking at someone in human resources, you might be sitting across from someone who is 24, 25 years old.
Right.
So what they're asking and how they're asking may be something that those of us who are older workers, we're not familiar with. So having to have the applicant worker have that understanding, but equally important to educate our employer bases and the human resources and those front-facing individuals who are going to be interacting first with the candidate to understand that this may not look to that particular candidate the way it looks to you. So just those conversations, how to have those. I think it was from Lynn Aspie at Jewish Family Services has done a lot of work on multi-generational workplaces. And right now we have baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, millennials, and these lovely Gen Zs that are just graduating, this year from high school,
right.
The 18-year-olds, all in the workplace at the same time. So how do we recognize each other's differences and each other's abilities? But I think there's a lot to looking at an older worker as a seasoned asset to an organization and being able to call upon the transferable skills that they have.
And we talk to clients a lot about not only having good command for what those transferable skills are, but to never assume that the recruiter they're talking about, number one, is a good recruiter and a good interviewer. And they literally could be the receptionist because the owner, it's such a small company, they don't have an HR department.
True.
And so that 20-year-old receptionist is the one who's talking to a 50-year-old who looks like their grandmother. So that's really part of preparing yourself as a great candidate, is to be ready for any kind of weird thing going on, even in the interviewing.
Right. And I think oftentimes, regardless of what age we are, when we're approaching a new opportunity and we look at a job posting and there might be 15 things listed that the employer, would like to have this candidate have. A lot of times we look at it and we have 13 of the 15 and we say, oh, those 2 that I don't have, I'm just going to get hung up on that. I'm going to focus on, I can't do this job. Where I'm encouraging workers of all ages to really look at that and go, don't take yourself out of the process. Focus on what you do bring to the table. And, maybe those 2 things that I don't have aren't as critical to the work as the other 13.
And not only that they have those 13, maybe missing 2, but they probably have another 13
Absolutely.
that are going to be very valuable to the employer that the employer hadn't even thought about.
Exactly. So don't get too focused on exactly what it says on the page, but just, thinking about the whole breadth of your, depth of your work experience and how you can bring that to the conversation.
Exactly. So to continue that conversation a little bit, we are trying at Employment for Seniors to work with employers and basically helping create a pipeline for them of people. So with your work at the chamber, yes, we're increasing our economic status of Columbus by all of these great new employers coming in with hundreds and hundreds of jobs. But let's talk about what the chamber's goals are in terms of helping those employers getting those pipelines and getting people connected. Because as we said, we got a lot of employers looking for people, a lot of people looking for work. Where's the disconnect and how can we get them connected?
Right. That's a great question. And I think that's where the chamber can really benefit both the worker, the potential candidate, and the employer. We're really about connectivity, and collaboration at the chamber. So some of that connectivity and networking comes from identifying who in the community, who in the region is providing workforce development activity. So Employment for Seniors, an amazing partner, advocating for the senior population and helping them find and maintain work. So my role at the chamber to connect then is to go back to our membership and say, have you considered, have you talked to, how about going out on August 23rd? Would you like to know more information about that? So that they're aware of populations that they maybe haven't considered in the past, or they don't know that the organization, what the mission is and what you do. So really the chamber's role in that, to be that space in between to connect those pieces, because often, again, I'll sit with potential job seekers and, they're looking for a role, and then I meet with businesses and they're looking for someone. So I'm like the Yenta, I guess, I'm just trying to bring them together. But it's really, it really is just about awareness. At the chamber, if I could break down just in 3 top level thoughts about my role in workforce development, it's identifying and vetting workforce development programs in the region. And there are lots that are doing great work, like Employment for Seniors.
Mm-hmm. We do. We really have an incredible amount of resources in Central Ohio. And we tell everyone, don't worry about, we're not going to be upset if you go to other agencies. Right. That's what we want you to do.
Exactly. We want to help them find employment. And then the second is communications, communicating out to our membership base and to others who these organizations are, what you do, how you do it, who you serve. And then the third and final is that connectivity, creating networking opportunities, whether it's a leadership for small business that we might do to have you guys come in and talk about your role in the work that you do, or just different networking events where we can bring you together, whether they're virtual or in real life. So just, again, it's awareness, of who's out there, what you're doing, and then making those connections.
Well, just as we can't expect a 14-year-old to decide what their college major is going to be, we can't assume that an individual is going to find a job on a linear path.
Exactly.
And they are going to be popping here and there and someplace else. And if part of those steps back and forth are to get other resources, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Because then they're going to be the best prepared candidate that an employer will see.
Absolutely. I remember, coming out of college, and I grew up in a very blue collar community, and my father worked in a factory for 40 years before he retired. So he moved up within the organization, just like so many people did. And now, as you described, there isn't necessarily this linear progression with one company or one organization. There's a lot of kind of moving back and forth, but I think the real key there is understanding what you do, how you do it, what you like to do, where you see yourself fitting in, and then finding those resources and agencies that can help assist you in that.
Exactly. And as I said, we have so many resources here, but each of us sort of have our niche, but we also have some strengths that the other agencies may not have. And one of our huge advantages that we have for our clients is that every new client who comes to Employment for Seniors gets a resources sheet. So it's not only websites that could be helpful to them, but it's all the other agencies that they can go to with addresses and phone numbers, and we post information about those programs, and it's all on our website. So even if you're not an Employment for Seniors client, all that information is there and they can find it.
That's fantastic.
So let's look at both sides of the networking and the connectivity piece of it. Real life examples. Let's say there's a 55, 60-year-old person listening to the podcast, which we know there are hundreds of them.
Yes.
How would they work with you, as well as on the other side, a business looking to, and they don't know anything about Employment for Seniors, they work with you to find that 55, 60-year-old person.
Right. So for the individual that's the job seeker, it might be a referral to something like Ohio Means Jobs. But again, that is an income-based eligibility, so that might work for some. For others, it would be maybe not necessarily going to the Ohio Means Jobs facility, but utilizing the services on the Ohio Means Jobs website, creating a resume. It might also be referring to some organization like Jewish Family Services or some place that actually can help you write a resume, prepare for an interview, that on that side of the equation. For the businesses, we're happy to make any connection we can. So if a business, and this happens on pretty much a daily basis, if a business contacts me or the chamber and says, I'm looking for fill in the accountants, I'm looking for, fill in the blank, then I listen to them and try to make the best recommendation. So, it might be recommending to Employment for Seniors. It might be making a recommendation to provider for ESOL, the Godman Guild, Columbus State, Eastland Fairfield, so that it's just really kind of those almost one-to-one kind of connection, and then to follow up and find out if that did actually work out for both the job seeker and the employer.
Because typically a chamber, you don't think about as an individual to go to a chamber and ask for that information. Chamber, you think of business.
Sure.
And and it's there to help businesses grow, develop, and such, but not to as an individual, but knowing that you're a phone call away for an individual makes a big difference.
Absolutely. And, it typically happens at the agency level. So someone from Employment for Seniors or another agency might call and say, I have this particular, individual, or I have this particular group of people. They're seeking this. But it's not unusual. We had an event earlier this week. The Chamber had an event earlier this week, CEO Insights with Dr. Drake from OSU. And I had the pleasure of sitting at the front desk as people were coming in to greet them, and two people came in that weren't with a company. They were there because they were seeking employment, and they viewed this as an amazing networking opportunity.
Right, absolutely.
Great.
So, I kind of see that as well. It may not be coming in and sitting down with me and, going over your resume, but we would certainly, let people know about all the unique opportunities to get in front of business.
We often tell clients, look at your local chamber as well as the Columbus Chamber, because there are events, oftentimes they're free and open to the public. And then you're looking at almost a B2B event. And who better to go and talk to about getting a job but businesses who are looking for people, as opposed to only networking with other unemployed individuals.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's key, and that, again, sometimes can be, it's hard for a lot of individuals to do that. And sometimes for people who've, not been in that position of having to network for a job for many years, that can require some courage to do. But please know that if you are someone listening and that's something you'd be interested in, you'd be welcomed and embraced at the Columbus Chamber of Commerce for any of those events. We love to have people come in and learn more about them and how we might be able to help them find their next role.
So what are the next steps with the chamber? Is there some sort of a 5-year plan to look at the basic population, vulnerable populations, but really any job seeker in Columbus has some level of vulnerability, and just to see what we can do to get things rolling?
Right. So prior to my joining the chamber back in April, I guess this was about a year or so ago, the chamber went through some strategic planning to just kind of reorganize and came up with 4 different pillars that the organization holds as tenets. And one of them is workforce and talent, which is where I reside. So those 4 pillars and the strategic planning committee, in addition to staff, is currently, as we speak, this morning even, we were meeting about creating the strategic plan so that we can figure out who we are, where we want to go, how we're going to know when we get there, and how do we course correct if we're not on the right track? How do we measure effectiveness so that we can be out in front as opposed to lagging behind? And it really is, I think, it's critical for any organization to do that, but we live in such a time where things, it feels really good because unemployment rate is really low, but it also feels a little scary and shaky as well. And it's a very volatile time when we look at things like AI and automation coming in, impacting and affecting the world of work. So I think the chamber is desirous of getting a strategic plan out, keeping in mind all of those things, who we serve as the business community, as the larger region as well, in addition to being mindful of the change in the economic landscape.
It's something just hit me, and I may be comparing apples and oranges, but the economy looks great now. That doesn't go on forever. Chances are pretty good on the short horizon there will be another recession in Columbus. Columbus was hit so hard in the early 2000s with that recession. Isn't it to our advantage to get these workforce development issues taken care of now, because the impact of a recession would lessen if we get people into the workforce, building the economy? Maybe we can skirt around that as we have in the past.
Right. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that we're in a unique position to almost have a bit of a crystal ball. If we compare, it's inevitable that, we know that economic good times don't last forever. It is inevitable that there's a downturn. It's just how dramatic is that downturn and how long does it last? So how do we prepare ourselves in the region? How do we prepare ourselves as employers and employees for that to happen? And I think a lot of it comes down to research and looking ahead at, again, what jobs are going to be replaced, what jobs are going to change significantly with automation, and then trying to figure out how we prepare people for that before we get to that point, as opposed to having it happen,
Right.
The wall comes down and then you go, now what do we do? So really thinking and planning for not just, a terrible downturn, but just planning because we know that work is going to continue to change exponentially, faster than probably it ever has.
Sure,
So-
absolutely.
So what do you want to be remembered for with your time at the chamber?
I hope that we serve the community well. I hope that we take care of some of the more vulnerable populations. We're looking at workforce, and this is in conjunction with the United Way and with Columbus State Community College, looking at workforce in 4 categories: emerging, people coming out of high school or college or a certificate program; transitional, people moving from one place in life to another, which could be an older worker, new Americans, veterans, formerly incarcerated; then incumbent workforce. How do we help our businesses build their capacity, looking at their current workers, how do we help them upskill or, get prepared for the next thing? And then mobile workforce, those coming from outside the region into the community. So if I could be remembered for anything, I would hope it would be that we recognized and served each one of those 4 categories well, because I think when we do serve each one of those 4 categories well, the entire community benefits.
There's a commonality between the 4.
Yeah.
They all want a job.
They all want a job. That's right. So true.
Put it together. Connect the dots.
Yes.
And as I said earlier, too, in the past, oftentimes the chamber reacted to its membership, which is certainly understandable. But the fact that they're looking past that and what can we do to merge those employers and workforce and talent together is going to be critical for us.
Right. And I think we do. I think the Chamber does a great service to its members by getting out in front of that and trying to plan and help our members. We have 1,600 plus members. Over 60% are small and mid-sized businesses. So they may not have the internal capacity to have, a lot of planning going on to forecast. So the Chamber would like to take a role in helping, especially our small to mid-sized businesses, prepare by giving them all the information that we can gather and then helping them understand the potential impact on their work.
Wonderful. Great. Kelly, thank you so much for being with us today. We have really enjoyed hearing more about all of those secret plans from the Chamber that are no longer secret. And let us know if we can do anything to help you with that process, because we are ready to do that. Thanks again, Kelly.
Thank you.
Circle270media.com.